We all saw the disturbing images and videos emerging out of Israel after the Hamas attack. Those videos and images were shocking and disturbing. Any person with any sense of humanity in him would not condone such acts or be supportive of such actions, and it's bound to make anyone feel really disgusted. People were killed, many women and children, and some men were taken back to Gaza. Only God knows what's happening with them, but it's quite evident from the images that we see what exactly is happening. Most of them would be sexually assaulted and killed eventually. Now, a lot of people have started to blame this on geopolitical and national interests of different countries, the United States, Israel, Iran. Many people say Saudi Arabia and Israel were supposed to sign the Abraham Accords and normalize relations between themselves, which Iran didn't want. There are other considerations too. However, if you look at this chart, you can see most of the Middle East and its population are strongly opposed to any sort of patch up with or normalizing relationships with Israel. Recently, America in the G20 summit brokered a deal between India, Middle East, and Eastern Europe, which will connect these three regions through India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel to Greece and other Eastern European countries. And these countries will trade more and make more money. This was done to counter the Belt and Road Initiative of China as well as the International North-South Transport Corridor, which was planned between India, Iran, and Russia. So the US pushed for India to join this India, Middle East, Eastern European corridor instead of joining the Russian-backed International North-South Transport Corridor to bypass the Suez Canal. Now, these are political considerations and geopolitical games which might have their own role to play in the equation, but that is really not why Hamas did what it did, and it is really not why such things have been happening for too long now. We cannot just blame politics and geopolitical equations here being the reason for such a massacre and such atrocities. After the attack, what was shocking to see was support Hamas and other Palestinian groups gathered from a lot of people, especially in the West. Now I can understand Muslims are supporting Hamas and their activities, but what's shocking is the number of people in the West who are actually supporting atrocities committed by Hamas. In many Western countries, we saw protests. It was shocking to see how the governments and the local population in Europe, in many places in Australia, New Zealand, America, they've just given up. They're just sitting, watching from a sideline as these people cheer on terrorists. These protests are happening in the major cities of Europe. It's not Middle East. These people are fighting the police, shouting Allahu Akbar, and all this that has happened in Europe, in America, in Australia. They are openly cheering terrorists. The Muslims supporting them, that's understandable. It's a religious issue for them. But the non-Muslims supporting them, they have to be the most crazy people out there. I mean, there's not much anyone can do about them except pray for them and give them some medicine, or maybe, who knows. Now, the real reason why these attacks keep happening is not because of geopolitical and political considerations. The reason why these attacks keep happening over and over again is because of one common denominator. If you look at all these terrorist groups, when I was growing up, we had Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Fatah, Hamas, ISIS. It's all the same. It's just different names, but they have the same ideology. And what is that ideology? The common denominator in all of them, the common ideology in all of them is Islam. So the real problem here is Islam and Islamic teachings. It really doesn't matter if it's in Palestine, Israel, it's in Afghanistan, or if it's in Chechnya. Any place you go, wherever there is Islamic teachings and followers of Muhammad, you have conflict. It's just there. It's just their religion that has created this conflict. Now, it's a very controversial statement to make. I understand that. However, it needs to be said. It is a civilizational fight that the Muslims have with every other religion in the world. No two religions are such enemies of each other as Islam is with pretty much any other religion that coexists in its vicinity. The Muslims have had issues with the Christians, the Jews, they have issues in India with the Hindus, they have issues with the Buddhists in Southeast Asia, in China, in other regions. All these issues stem from the teachings of Islam, which call for expansion of Islamic territories to the extent where the whole world actually starts following Islam and becomes Muslim. According to Islamic theology, the world has been divided into three parts by some people. Some call it four, some five. The basic idea behind this division is to highlight where Islam stands in that that particular land. The first stage, of course, is Darul Dawa. It is a region where Islam has been recently introduced. Here, the Muslims are advised to simply keep to themselves, just pray and do the work, establish themselves, do not create any conflict or fight, try to spread the word through goodwill. Then comes Darul Amin, where the population becomes a bit sizable. This is the time they start petitioning the local population that they be given some rights, some place, some land to build a mosque to worship. Maybe they can call their brothers and sisters over so that they can come and live with them, their families. Darul Amin is the place where they start bringing people in, their own people in. Darul Amin right now would be something like Australia, America, where the Muslim population is sizable. They are simply petitioning to be allowed to build mosques, call in more of their relatives. They're not writing. They pretend to be peaceful and try to spread the word through simple persuasion. The third stage is Darul Ad or Darul Sul, a region where Islam has a truce with that people of that region. They will not try to really fight or expand in that region, but that's all nonsense, as we'll see ahead what they'll do. Even if they have a truce with you, the Muslims will always violate that truce and blame it on the other side for violating the truce, so they have to fight and get into the stage of Darul Harab. Final stage, of course, is Darul Harab or Darul Islam. It is the abode of war. It is where Islam could and should expand. It is when their population becomes something around 20 to 25%, 30%. That is when they start rioting, like what happens in India, in Europe. There are riots in cities. They're breaking down stuff. They're getting violent. They'll fight. They'll say the other side does not allow them to worship and does not allow them to live the way Islam asks them to live. So they will start blaming the other side, the local population, for stifling their rights as a Muslim, and not letting them live peacefully, because Muslims want to live peacefully, but the local population who have welcomed these Muslims, they don't want them to live peacefully and they want them suffering, so they have to fight for their rights, right? This is the idea they'll present. And the final stage, of course, is Darul Islam. It is where majority of the population is Islamic, where Islamic laws follows. So if their population increases to 50% or more than 50%, then their religion commands that they make sure Islamic law, Sharia law, that is implemented in those lands instead of their local laws. We have in India seen such instances in many parts of India where the Muslim population is more than 50%. There the minorities have no right. Countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, Islamic countries, when they were created, they had a sizable around 14 to 20, 30% of the population which was non-Muslim. They have either converted all of them into Islam or made them flee their countries and run to India or other countries. So wherever Islam becomes majority in Darul Islam, the minorities will have no rights. You cannot worship your God. You cannot live the way you want to live. You have to follow Islamic law. Otherwise, you are open target to be punished as per their Islamic law. Now, I have studied Quran a little bit, and I'll show you some of the verses in Quran which actually call for fighting the non-believers and doing whatever to them, because it's all permitted. So jihad in Arabic is actually strive hard. This is a justification of taking women and then saying, oh well, she's converted to Islam now. So it happens a lot in India, in poor countries, where these Muslim men will kidnap girls from other communities, have sex with them, forcibly get married to them by forcing the girls to get married to them. Like in Quran, the girl accepts Islam, so, and then they will justify it saying it's, nothing wrong happened. I didn't rape her, I didn't kidnap her. She just converted to Islam. She realized Allah. So they have religious justification for their actions. They will always make this a narrative. It's the other side that has forced them to do these acts, and all these acts are permitted as per Quran because they are unbelievers and they are fighting the Muslims. So you can do whatever you want to do with them. From these verses, it's clear that Islam as a religion has no problems in inciting violence and doing violence against the non-believers. They will make conditions to perpetuate this violence as long as the other side is exterminated or it is all converted into Islam. But we have a lot of apologists for Muslims and also Muslims in the West and other parts of the world who will come out and say, oh, this is not real Islam. The real Islam is all about peace. Well, sure, it might be about peace for Muslims, the teachings, but It's not how it actually works. If you look at Islamic countries, they're always fighting amongst each other. Shia, Sunni, or some other sect fight, or there's a fight between Arabs and non-Arabs, or who is a better Muslim or not. So they're always fighting. Pure Islamic countries are not peaceful at all. They're not safe at all. A lot of people will come and say that this is not the accurate representation of Islam. Islam promotes peace. It does not promote violence. But that's all bullshit. They will say people like Osama bin Laden, Al-Zawahiri, Mohammed Atta, the guy who flew the 9/11 plane into World Trade Center, that all these guys are misled. They don't know anything about Islam. Again, that's a load of bullshit. But they were intelligent guys. They all studied. Al-Zawahiri was a PhD. Mohammed Atta did his master's in engineering in America. Osama was also a rich guy making a lot of money, studied abroad, probably sleeping around with blondes in Sweden. And they all gave all of that up and came back and fought for Islam. They went into a cave. They fought there. They were not scared to lay down their lives. Now, these guys, they're not stupid people. They're not misled cattle. These people understood Islam, the words of Islam. They understood the teachings of Islam. The only difference was these people were people who took action upon their belief. They had faith in those beliefs, and they took action to make sure that Islamic rule prevailed all over the world, at least in their own countries. They started the fight with America so that America gets out of Middle East. These people are not stupid. They know exactly what Islam is, what Islam calls for. It calls for a violent upheaval where Islam is not being followed and where Muslims are in danger. All these people sipping cocktails telling, oh no, Islam is not like this. They are basically either one of the two things. Either they are cowards, or the second part is they're playing the long game. The long game being they can easily move to Western countries. They can, or Western countries, or any country, even in the East, like in India, there are Muslims who are making money, and in China, in Japan, I see. So Korea. So these guys, they move into the society. There they can make money, they can marry non-Muslim women. If you look at most of the rich Muslim guys, they'll always end up with a non-Muslim wife most of the times. Any celebrity or anyone who does a little bit anything, becomes a sports player or anything, they're all in the end marrying non-Muslim women. I mean, if they're so concerned about Islam and how Islam should be pure, why don't they marry some Muslim women? And the worst part is the West actually, especially in the West, and even in India to an extent, people allow them to do this. And so these guys are thinking there's no need to fight. We can easily come here, make money, sleep with their women, either marry them or whore them out eventually. So we will expand. So there is no need to go through the violent route. But guys like Osama and other guys, they are more stringent when it comes to Islamic texts. They want to follow the book completely. They don't want to play the long game. They want to play the short game. They want a violent fight and take over right now. They don't want to play the 2-3 generation game where eventually the Muslims will outnumber the local population, and then the local population either has to move or they have to convert. It is evident from the fertility rates across the world that fertility rates are going down in almost every country except Islamic countries. Even in Africa, where most of the fertility rate is high, there are a lot of people who are Muslims. Even in India, the non-Muslims, their fertility rate is down to 1.5, 1.6. But the Muslims still have a high fertility rate, so India's fertility rate averages out to 2. Look at other countries, China, Japan, Korea, Europe, Russia. They're all going down. America, Europe is sustained on increased immigration from India, Africa, and Islamic countries. And it's mostly the Africans and Islamists who are having babies, living off government's money. Eventually, the end game is these people will replace the local populations. They will be more in numbers. Once they're more than 25-30%, then you have the Darul Harb state. They will start rioting, fighting, asking for their rights. And soon when they're 50 and above, Darul Islam, you minorities will have no rights. You will have to convert or either die. So you'll have to convert, or son, you'll have to die. Simple as that. So be prepared. There is no escaping this reality. The Muslims, their numbers will increase. The non-Muslims, their numbers are decreasing, mostly because women in non-Muslim religions have become independent. They don't want to have 2-3 children. Forget about having 4-5 like the Muslims. So they're not having children. Most of the times people are not even getting married. You have the whole climate change, which is freaking people out more, so they don't want to have kids. The inflation, reckless printing of money has made it basically economically not viable for people to have more than one child. And then you have the Muslims and others who are having three, four, five kids. They're just leaving them out on the streets that, oh, Allah will see, Allah will see how they live or whatever. So eventually we will be outnumbered by them in every country, even in India. Right now in India, I think India will sustain this Muslim onslaught for a couple of decades at least. But the coming decades, the next 10, 20 years for America, Europe, Australia will be very difficult for the locals. By locals, I mean the white Europeans, because these people will increase and they will either force you to convert or you will have to move. It's their way or the highway. You already have grifters like Andrew Tate and others who are trying to spread Islam everywhere, that Islam is the religion of peace. I'm so great. I was a pimp before. I was pimping women out, but now I've found Islam and I'm such a great man. Now I'm feeding Muslim children in Palestine. He's already there trying to convert people to in the West to Islam. The next 10, 20 years will be very difficult for America, Europe, and other Western countries. India, China, and even Japan to an extent will hold their own for the next 2, 3 decades.